You need to watch this if you crave chills down your spine. Welcome to Soul Studios. Here, true crime meets the unknown. Suspense lurks in every shadow and supernatural forces whisper from the dark. We craft chilling, edge-of-your-seat short stories inspired by the eerie, the unexplained, and the most haunting mysteries. 3 new stories drop every week, each one darker than the last. Are you ready to step inside? Subscribe now before the next story finds you.
The Silent Witness, a dark conspiracy uncovered. When bright and ambitious college student Emily Carter vanishes without a trace, Detective Sam Carter and his partner Lisa Moreno begin a desperate search for answers. But as they dig deeper, they uncover a chilling link between Emily's disappearance and a 5-year-old cold case, that of Rachel Miles, a journalist who vanished while investigating a secretive organization known only as the Foundation. The deeper they go, the more they realize that Blackwood isn't just a town, it's a machine, controlled by wealthy elites who will do anything to keep their secrets buried. Corrupt officers, missing evidence, and powerful men pulling strings from the shadows turn the case into a deadly game of cat and mouse. Then a homeless man named Wally Griggs steps forward with a chilling revelation. He saw Emily get into a car the night she disappeared. And the driver? Dr. James Holloway, a beloved professor with a pristine reputation. As Sam and Moreno race against time, they discover the Foundation isn't just a social club. It's a network of untouchable elites who have been making people disappear for decades. And now they know too much. When a trap is set and they barely escape with Emily alive, they realize the nightmare is far from over. The Foundation is bigger than anyone imagined, and some of its most powerful members have already vanished, ready to rebuild, ready to silence anyone who dares to expose them. But Sam Carter isn't done. A gripping mystery thriller of power, corruption, and the cost of truth. Some secrets refuse to stay buried, and some battles never truly end. Subscribe for more suspense, mystery, and true crime-inspired stories. Chapter 1. The Unlikely Witness. A cold wind howled through the empty streets of Blackwood, a small but sprawling town nestled between dense forests and the long-forgotten remnants of an old industrial past. The town had always been a strange mix of wealth and decay. Gleaming glass office buildings in the downtown district standing in stark contrast to the crumbling brick warehouses along the outskirts. Blackwood was the kind of place where secrets festered, where old money controlled everything from local politics to the justice system. The Blackwood County Police Department sat in the heart of town, a squat, grey building that looked as tired as the officers who worked inside. It was the kind of place where detectives worked long hours for little thanks, where unsolved cases lingered in filing cabinets, waiting for justice that might never come. Detective Sam Carter rubbed his eyes and took another sip of his bitter coffee, glancing at the clock on the wall. 11:42 p.m. Another late night. He and his partner, Lisa Moreno, had spent hours combing through old reports on the Emily Carter case. No relation to him, but her name had haunted him for months just the same. Emily had been the town's golden girl, a bright, ambitious college student with her whole future ahead of her. Then, one night, she simply vanished. No forced entry at her apartment, no struggle, no signs of foul play. Just gone. The case had gone cold, the media had moved on, and the department had been left with nothing but dead ends. And then he walked in. The station doors creaked open, and in shuffled an old man, hunched and wrapped in layers of ragged clothing. His face was hidden beneath a thick, tangled beard, his eyes shadowed by the brim of a weathered baseball cap. He smelled of the streets, of rain-soaked cardboard and the faint, acrid scent of whiskey. The desk sergeant, Officer Grady, barely looked up from his paperwork. "We're closed," he muttered. "I got something important," the old man croaked, his voice cracked like dry earth. "Come back in the morning," Grady sighed. The old man didn't move. He just stood there, trembling slightly, his hands buried deep in the folds of his oversized coat. Something about his stance made Sam look up. There was something in his eyes, a quiet desperation, a knowledge of something dark. Moreno beat Sam to it. She put down her pen and walked over. "Sir, what's your name?" "Wally," he rasped. Wally Griggs. Sam frowned. He knew the name. Everyone in Blackwood did. Wally had been living on the streets for years, a fixture of the alleyways and abandoned lots. Most people ignored him, assuming he was just another lost soul, another casualty of the system. "What's this about, Wally?" Moreno asked gently. He licked his cracked lips, glancing around nervously. Then he leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. "It's about that girl, the one that went missing." Sam's entire body stiffened. "You mean Emily Carter?" Wally nodded. "I seen her that night. I know what happened to her." For a long moment no one spoke. The only sound was the distant hum of a radio playing from another officer's desk. Sam leaned forward. "Wally, why didn't you come forward sooner?" The old man hesitated. "'Cause I was scared," he admitted. His eyes flickered toward the door, as if expecting someone to burst in at any second. "Still am." Moreno and Sam exchanged a look. They had dealt with unreliable witnesses before, drunks, addicts, people looking for attention, but Wally looked genuinely afraid. "All right," Sam said carefully. "Tell us what you saw." Wally took a slow breath, his hands shaking. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I saw her get in a car." Sam felt his stomach drop. They had no eyewitnesses from the night Emily disappeared. No security footage, no traffic cameras. If Wally really had seen something, this could be the break they'd been waiting for. "What kind of car?" Moreno asked. Wally swallowed hard. "A black sedan. New. Fancy looking." Sam felt his pulse quicken. "Did you see who was driving?" Another long pause. Then Wally nodded. "I did." His voice wavered. "It was him." "Who?" Moreno pressed. Wally took another nervous glance at the door, then leaned in so close they could smell the stale alcohol on his breath. "Dr. James Holloway." Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Sam's grip tightened around his coffee cup. Dr. James Holloway wasn't just anyone. He was a beloved figure in Blackwood, a philanthropist, a professor, a man whose name was whispered with admiration at charity galas and academic gatherings. He had been interviewed early on in the investigation, like many others who knew Emily, but no suspicion had ever fallen on him. He had a rock-solid alibi and no connection to the crime. And yet, here was Wally Griggs, a man with nothing to gain, saying he saw Emily Carter willingly get into his car. Sam took a deep breath, his mind racing. If this was true, it changed everything. And if it was true, then they were about to uncover something far worse than just a missing girl. Chapter 2: The Missing Link. The interrogation room at Blackwood County Police Department was dimly lit, a single overhead bulb casting long shadows over the scarred wooden table. The walls were a dull, lifeless grey, intentionally devoid of anything that might make a person feel comfortable. The air smelled of stale coffee and cigarette smoke from decades of stress-filled interviews. Detective Sam Carter and Lisa Moreno sat across from Walter Wally Griggs, who hunched forward in his chair, his calloused hands gripping a styrofoam cup of coffee as if it were the only thing keeping him tethered to the world. His coat still smelled of the damp streets, but there was something about his eyes, haunted, nervous, that kept Sam on edge. "You're saying you saw Emily Carter get into Dr. James Holloway's car?" Sam repeated, needing to hear it again. Wally nodded slowly, his fingers trembling as he brought the coffee to his lips. "I was down by Mercer Alley that night, near that fancy cafe she liked. You know the one. Luna's." Sam knew it well. Emily had worked there part-time as a barista while she was in college. "She was outside," Wally continued. "Had her phone out, looking like she was waiting on someone. Then that black car pulls up, real clean, real expensive. I ain't good with cars, but it was one of those new ones, the kind rich folks drive." Sam glanced at Moreno. They had checked for security footage from that area before, but the cameras at Luna's had been malfunctioning the night Emily vanished. A frustrating dead end. "You're sure it was Holloway driving?" Moreno asked, her voice steady but skeptical. Wally exhaled sharply, rubbing his face. "Yeah, I seen him round town before. Gives speeches at the college, always in the paper, shaking hands with big shots." He hesitated, as if weighing whether he should continue. "I remember, 'cause I thought, that don't seem right. A girl like her getting in a car with a man like him? Something felt off." Sam leaned forward. "Did she seem upset? Did she look like she was being forced?" Wally shook his head. "Nah, she got in like she was expecting him, but she looked, I don't know, hesitant maybe, like she wasn't sure about something." He stared down into his cup as if the memory itself was too much. Then they drove off, I ain't seen her since." Moreno scribbled notes, her mind working through the information. Holloway had been interviewed early in the case. He had claimed he barely knew Emily, said she was just another student who attended some of his lectures. He had been calm, cooperative, and most importantly, he had an alibi. According to records, Holloway had been attending a faculty dinner the night Emily disappeared, surrounded by esteemed colleagues, university board members, and even the mayor. It had been a dead end at the time. But now, Wally's statement threw everything into question. Sam exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Why didn't you come forward sooner, Wally?" Wally let out a bitter chuckle. "You think folks listen to people like me? I've been sleeping on benches since before you was wearing a badge, son. Ain't nobody give a damn what I say." His expression darkened. "But I seen the news. That girl's parents on TV begging for answers. I couldn't sleep right no more." He looked up, his eyes filled with something close to guilt. "I had to say something, even if it's too late." Moreno leaned forward. "It's not too late. You're helping us." Sam's jaw clenched. If Wally was telling the truth, it meant Holloway had been lying for months. The alibi, the lack of suspicion, the way he had seamlessly faded into the background of the investigation. It also meant they had missed something. Moreno closed her notebook. "We need to recheck Holloway's alibi." Reopening old wounds. Within an hour, the detectives were back in their office, sorting through old files. The faculty dinner where Holloway had allegedly been that night had been held at the Blackwood Club, an elite social club known for its deep ties to the town's power players. Sam frowned as he read over the guest list again. This is a rock-solid alibi. There were dozens of witnesses who placed him there that night. Moreno drummed her fingers against her desk. What if he was there, but left at some point? If he ducked out and came back before anyone noticed? It was a long shot, but not impossible. They needed a way to confirm whether Holloway could have slipped away unnoticed. As they dug deeper, Moreno's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "Who is it?" Sam asked. She hesitated. "Carly Matthews." Sam stiffened. The name sent a chill down his spine. Carly had been Emily's best friend. She had been the one to raise the alarm when Emily first went missing. The last person to see her alive until now. Moreno answered. "Carly?" "Detective." Carly's voice was tight, breathless. "I need to see you, right now." "What's wrong?" A pause. Then in a shaky whisper, "It's about Dr. Holloway." Sam and Moreno exchanged a glance. They had spent months chasing ghosts, following false leads, hitting dead ends. Now, for the first time, it felt like they were finally getting somewhere. And the closer they got to the truth, the more they realized how much danger they were in. Chapter 3. The cracks appear. The steady drizzle over Blackwood had turned into a full-fledged downpour by the time detectives Sam Carter and Lisa Moreno pulled up outside Carly Matthews' apartment complex. The building was a tired, 3-story brick structure on the west side of town, where students and young professionals could afford to live if they didn't mind the constant hum of the nearby train yard. The rain tapped rhythmically against the windshield, blurring the streetlights into glowing halos. Sam shut off the engine and sighed. "You think she's been holding back on us this whole time?" Moreno glanced at the illuminated apartment window above. She sounded scared on the phone. "That tells me whatever she's about to say, she's just as afraid of who she's saying it about." They climbed the worn concrete stairs to the second floor, where Carly's apartment door was slightly ajar. Sam tensed, exchanging a look with Moreno before knocking. The door opened wider, revealing Carly Matthews, her face pale, her eyes bloodshot. "Come in," she whispered, stepping aside. A fractured friendship. The apartment was small and tidy, aside from a half-eaten sandwich on the coffee table and a few textbooks scattered across the couch. The blinds were drawn, the room dimly lit by a single lamp. Carly hugged her arms, her whole body wound tight. Sam and Moreno sat across from her, the tension palpable. "You said you lied to us before," Moreno said, cutting to the chase. "What did you leave out?" Carly hesitated, running a hand through her hair. "It's about Emily and Dr. Holloway." Sam's pulse quickened. "I told you I was the last person to see her, but I wasn't," Carly admitted. "That night she told me she had a meeting with him." "Holloway?" Sam asked. Carly nodded, her face contorted with guilt. "She said he wanted to discuss an opportunity, something that could help her career." She swallowed hard. I didn't like it. I told her it felt weird, that she was getting too close to him. We fought. She said I didn't understand, that she could handle herself. Carly's voice broke. Then she left, and I never saw her again. Sam let the silence stretch before speaking. Did she ever mention Rachel Miles? Carly's eyes widened. Yes, that's the other thing. A few weeks before she disappeared, Emily started asking about her. She even went to the library to pull up old newspaper articles about Rachel's case. Moreno leaned in. What did she want to know? She asked me if I remembered Rachel, Carly said. I did. Everyone did. It was all over town when she went missing. Who was Rachel Miles? Rachel Miles had been a sophomore at Blackwood University, an aspiring journalist with a sharp mind and a fearless attitude. She had been known for digging into local stories that others wouldn't touch: corruption, crime, the town's underbelly. 5 years ago, she vanished. She had been last seen leaving the campus library late at night. Like Emily, there were no signs of a struggle, no messages, no body. She had simply disappeared. The case had gone cold within months, much to the dismay of her family. There were no suspects, no leads, only whispered rumors that Rachel had gotten too close to something dangerous. Some believed she had been kidnapped, others thought she had left town voluntarily. Now, Emily Carter had been looking into her. Sam exhaled. Emily must have found something about Rachel's disappearance. Maybe she confronted Holloway with it. Carly shook her head. I don't know. But I do know that after she started asking questions, she started acting different. She was nervous, jumpy. Like she was being watched, Moreno asked. Carly nodded. Yeah, she even joked about it once, said she felt like someone was following her. Sam felt a pit form in his stomach. Rachel Miles had asked the wrong questions. Then she vanished. Emily Carter had asked the same questions, and then she vanished. This was no coincidence. Re-examining Holloway's alibi. Back at the precinct, Sam and Moreno pulled up Holloway's file. His alibi had been airtight from the beginning. He had been at a faculty dinner the night Emily disappeared. At first glance, his timeline checked out. 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., faculty dinner at the Blackwood Club. Multiple witnesses, including the mayor and university board members, confirmed his presence. But Moreno wasn't convinced. What if he was there and left at some point? She started pulling up old security footage from the club's valet stand. They watched the grainy black and white footage flicker on the screen. Then at 8:47 p.m., something caught their attention. A sleek black sedan. The timestamp didn't lie. Holloway's car had left the event nearly an hour before it ended. Sam felt his heart start to race. He had time, he said. Time to meet Emily. Moreno zoomed in, but the footage was too grainy to make out the driver's face. Still, it was enough to rip apart Holloway's alibi. They finally had a reason to bring him in. Then Sam's phone rang. It was Officer Grady at the front desk. His voice was tense. You guys better get down here, he said. Why? Sam asked. Because Wally Griggs is missing. The witness disappears. By the time they arrived at Mercer Bridge, the rain had slowed to a steady mist. Wally's makeshift camp, a collection of tarps, blankets, and old crates, had been destroyed. Tents overturned, belongings scattered, no sign of Wally. Moreno crouched near the remnants of his campsite and picked up a crumpled piece of paper. She smoothed it out, her eyes scanning the jagged handwriting. Then she read it aloud. You should have kept your mouth shut. Sam exhaled sharply, his pulse pounding. Wally had been their only witness, and now he was gone. Whoever had taken Emily Carter didn't just want to stay hidden. They were watching, they were listening, and they were willing to do anything to keep their secrets buried. Chapter 4. A Web of Deception. The morning fog clung to the streets of Blackwood, muting the early sunlight into a dull grey haze. The town seemed quieter than usual, as if it too held its breath in anticipation of what was to come. At the Blackwood County Police Department, the atmosphere was tense. The disappearance of Wally Griggs had shaken the precinct, leaving the officers uneasy and the detectives relentless. Detective Sam Carter and Lisa Moreno stood in front of the whiteboard in the cramped briefing room, photos of Emily Carter, Rachel Miles, and Dr. James Holloway staring back at them. Red lines connected their images, crisscrossing through notes and timelines. Moreno tapped the image of Holloway. We've got motive, opportunity, and now a shaky alibi. We need to bring him in. Sam nodded. But we need to be careful. Holloway has connections everywhere. If we move too fast, he'll lawyer up and we'll lose our chance. Their plan was simple. Find cracks in Holloway's seemingly perfect life and exploit them. They started with his financials, poring over bank statements, donations, and property records. Then they found it. A series of sizable, unexplained transactions to an offshore account. The dates lined up suspiciously with the disappearances of both Emily and Rachel. The confrontation. That afternoon, Sam and Moreno drove to Blackwood University, where Holloway's office was tucked away in the prestigious Harrington Hall, a Gothic-style building draped in ivy. Students milled about the manicured lawns, oblivious to the darkness lurking behind the professor's polished reputation. Holloway greeted them with a practiced smile, his office filled with academic awards and photos of him shaking hands with local dignitaries. "To what do I owe the pleasure, detectives?" he asked smoothly, gesturing for them to sit. Sam remained standing, eyes locked on the professor. "We need to ask you a few more questions about Emily Carter." Holloway's smile didn't falter, but a flicker of annoyance crossed his eyes. "I've already told you everything I know." Moreno opened her notebook. "We spoke to a witness who saw Emily get into your car the night she disappeared." Silence. Holloway's fingers drummed against his desk, the only sign of his irritation. "That's impossible," he replied, voice calm but strained. "I was at a faculty dinner, as you already know." Sam stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "We have security footage that says otherwise. Your car was seen leaving the club that night." Holloway's facade cracked, but only for a moment. He leaned back, his smile returning, sharper this time. "Do you have any actual evidence, detective? Or are you grasping at straws, trying to build a case against me because you have nothing else?" Moreno closed her notebook, standing up. "We'll be in touch, Dr. Holloway." As they left the office, Sam felt the weight of Holloway's stare on their backs. They had rattled him, but it wasn't enough. They needed more. The disappearance of Wally Griggs. Back at the precinct, they briefed Captain Evelyn Harker on Wally's disappearance. She was a stern woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Wally was our only witness," Sam said. "If Holloway or someone connected to him took Wally, it means they're watching us." Harker frowned, fingers steepled under her chin. "I'll have patrols canvass the area, but you two need to keep digging. If Holloway's involved in this, he's not working alone." Unveiling the foundation. Late that night, Moreno found a lead buried in the old files of Rachel Miles' case. It was a photograph from a university event, Rachel in the background, serving drinks. In the foreground stood Holloway, laughing with a group of men, all older, all wealthy, all familiar faces in Blackwood's elite circles. A notation in Rachel's handwriting was scrawled on the back of the photo. "The Foundation?" Sam stared at the photo, the name sending a chill down his spine. "What the hell is the Foundation?" he muttered. Moreno turned her laptop toward him, showing a grainy scan of an old newspaper article. The headline read, "Philanthropy or Secrecy? The Foundation hosts annual gala." The article listed attendees, business moguls, politicians, university trustees, all pillars of the community, all men who seemed untouchable. "The Foundation is a private club," Moreno explained. "Charity events, scholarships, funding local projects." But Rachel was digging into them. Sam's eyes narrowed. What if they're more than just a club? What if they're using their power for something else? Moreno's voice was low. Emily was looking into Rachel's disappearance. Rachel was looking into the Foundation. And now they're both gone. The silence of the streets. The next morning they drove back to Mercer Bridge, hoping to find any sign of Wally. The camp was still deserted, the makeshift shelters sagging under the weight of the previous night's rain. An old woman named Marge, another fixture of Blackwood's streets, approached them cautiously. "You're looking for Wally, aren't you?" she asked, her voice a raspy whisper. Sam nodded. "You know where he is?" Marge shook her head, eyes filled with fear. "He told me someone was following him, said they knew what he saw, what he told you." She hesitated. "People like us, we disappear and nobody notices." Sam clenched his fists. "Well, we notice." She nodded sadly, shuffling back into the shadows of the bridge. Moreno sighed, looking at the empty camp. "We're dealing with more than just Holloway. This is bigger." Sam's gaze hardened. "Then we bring it all down. Holloway, the Foundation, everyone involved." But as they walked back to their car, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that the web they had stumbled into was far larger and far darker than they could have ever imagined. The storm was coming, and when it hit, no one in Blackwood would be safe. Chapter 5. A Body in the Woods. The early morning mist hung low over Blackwood Forest, turning the abandoned Holloway estate into something out of a nightmare. The trees loomed tall, their skeletal branches swaying in the cold wind, while the damp earth beneath Detective Sam Carter's boots squelched with every step. For years, the property had been nothing more than an eerie landmark, a forgotten piece of land tied to one of Blackwood's most powerful families. Now, armed with a search warrant, the Blackwood County Police Department had finally gained access to the estate. And within an hour, they had found something. Sam stood near the collapsed fencing behind the estate's old storage shed, watching as officers carefully dug through the soft, disturbed soil. The K9 unit had led them straight to this spot, their relentless barking confirming their worst suspicions. The scent of death lingered in the air. Then, one of the officers froze. "Detectives, we've got something." The Discovery, Sam and Lisa Moreno stepped forward as the forensic team cleared more dirt, revealing the unmistakable outline of a human skeleton curled into itself. The bones were discolored, the remains partially mummified from years of burial. Bits of fabric clung to the body, but Sam's eyes were drawn to one thing, a rusted bracelet barely visible beneath the dirt. His stomach twisted. He had seen that bracelet before. It belonged to Rachel Miles. DNA confirms the truth. Hours later, back at the Blackwood County Coroner's Office, Dr. Emily Thatcher stood over the remains, removing her gloves with a grim expression. "We ran the DNA through the system," she said, her voice heavy. "It's confirmed." Sam exhaled, his grip tightening on the edge of the metal table. It's Rachel Miles. 5 years. For 5 years, Rachel had been buried in the woods while her family begged for answers, while the police investigated dead-end leads, while Holloway continued to live his life untouched, and now they finally had her. But the discovery only raised more terrifying questions. Moreno, arms crossed, asked, "Cause of death?" Thatcher hesitated before responding, "Blunt force trauma to the skull." She motioned toward the bones of Rachel's arms and legs. But here's what's worse. She suffered multiple fractures before she died. Some of them healed. Sam felt a cold chill creep up his spine. "You're saying she was kept alive?" Thatcher nodded grimly. "For an extended period of time. She wasn't killed immediately after she went missing." Sam clenched his fists. Rachel hadn't just disappeared. She had been held captive. She had suffered. And if Rachel had been kept alive, could Emily still be out there? The Foundation connection. Back at the precinct, Sam and Moreno pored over Rachel's old case files. She was investigating something before she vanished, Moreno muttered, flipping through Rachel's notes. Something bigger. Then they found it, a photograph from a university gala tucked into Rachel's old files. In the background, Rachel was standing with a notebook in hand, watching the crowd. In the foreground, Dr. James Holloway, laughing with a group of powerful men. Scrawled in Rachel's handwriting on the back of the photo was a single word: the Foundation. Sam's pulse quickened. Rachel had been digging into the Foundation before she disappeared. Then, years later, Emily Carter started investigating Rachel's disappearance. Now Emily was missing too. This wasn't just about Holloway. This was bigger. A warning in the dark. That night, Sam sat alone in his car outside his apartment, staring at the rain-slicked streets. They had found Rachel. They had shattered Holloway's alibi. They had tied him to the Foundation. But Emily was still missing. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Sam hesitated before answering. "Carter." Silence. Then a voice. Low, distorted. "You should stop digging." Sam's grip tightened. "Who is this?" A pause. Then the voice spoke again. "If you want to find the girl, she doesn't have much time." The line went dead. A chill ran down Sam's spine. Someone was watching them. Someone knew where Emily was. And now, they knew he was getting too close to the truth. Chapter 6. The Secret Society. The neon lights of Blackwood's downtown flickered against the rain-slicked pavement as Detective Sam Carter sat inside an unmarked police cruiser, his fingers drumming against the dashboard. Across the street, the grand entrance of the Blackwood Club loomed, a historic members-only establishment known for hosting the town's elite. Tonight, inside that building was Dr. James Holloway. And if the evidence was right, the Foundation, the secretive group tied to Rachel Miles's disappearance and Emily Carter's possible abduction, was meeting there as well. We're finally at their doorstep, Sam thought. He glanced over at Lisa Moreno, who sat in the passenger seat, her eyes locked on the entrance. We're pushing against a damn wall, Sam. These people are powerful. Yeah, Sam muttered. But even powerful people make mistakes. The Foundation's shadow for days, the detectives had been peeling back the layers of secrecy surrounding the Foundation. It was publicly known as a charitable organization, a coalition of businessmen, politicians, and university officials who funded local projects and scholarships. But behind closed doors, it was something else. Rachel Miles had been looking into the Foundation before she vanished, and now Emily Carter, who had been following Rachel's trail, had disappeared the same way. It wasn't coincidence, and it all led back to Dr. James Holloway. The problem? Every lead ended in a dead end. Witnesses wouldn't talk. Records were missing. The more they dug, the more it became clear. The Foundation was protected. So if the evidence wouldn't come to them, Sam and Moreno would bring the fight directly to the Blackwood Club, the secretive heart of the Foundation itself. "Let's go," Sam said, opening his car door. Moreno sighed. "This is reckless." "Since when has that stopped us?" Together, they walked toward the building, flashing their badges at the disinterested doorman. The interior was exactly what Sam expected. Dark wood paneling, the scent of old cigars, and the quiet hum of wealth and power lingering in the air. At the bar, Dr. James Holloway stood with a drink in hand, mid-conversation with a group of well-dressed men. His laughter cut short as his eyes met Sam's. The tension was instant. "Detectives," Holloway greeted smoothly, setting his glass down. "I wasn't aware you had a membership here." Sam ignored the pleasantries. "Cut the crap, Holloway. We know about the Foundation." The room around them grew quieter, eyes discreetly shifting toward them. Holloway's smile barely faltered, but there was something darker behind his gaze. "Detective Carter," he said evenly, "you sound like a man grasping at shadows." Sam pulled a photo from his pocket, the one of Rachel Miles at the gala. He tapped Holloway's image in the foreground. "You were there, with men from the Foundation, the same time Rachel was investigating you. Now she's dead." Holloway's expression remained unreadable. "That's quite the theory." Moreno stepped forward. "Rachel found something on you, on this place. And when Emily started looking into her disappearance, she went missing too. So tell us, Doctor, where is Emily Carter?" A flicker of something crossed Holloway's face. It was only there for a second, but Sam caught it, just enough to confirm that he knew. Before Holloway could respond, a deep voice cut through the air. "I think that's enough, detectives." Sam turned to see Gerald Langston, Blackwood's mayor, standing nearby with a polished smile. He was one of the most powerful men in town, and one of the Foundation's biggest donors. Langston placed a hand on Holloway's shoulder. "You can't just come in here throwing accusations around. That's called harassment." Sam clenched his jaw. "I call it an investigation." Langston's smile sharpened. "And I call it career suicide." Silence settled between them. Holloway exhaled, as if disappointed. "Detectives, I'd advise you to step carefully. You're not the first people to ask questions." Sam's pulse quickened. The unspoken message was clear. Rachel asked questions. Now she's dead. Emily asked questions. Now she's missing. And if Sam and Moreno didn't back off, they'd be next. A dangerous revelation. Back at the precinct, the weight of the night lingered in the air. Moreno slammed her badge onto the desk, pacing. "Damn it, Sam. They know exactly what we're after." "They're scared," Sam said, sitting down heavily. Holloway slipped. "Did you see his face when we mentioned Emily?" "He knows where she is." Sam nodded. "Or at least, he knows what happened to her." Moreno pulled up her laptop and scrolled through records of the Foundation's finances. "There's something we're missing. These men aren't just protecting each other. There's something bigger at play." Then she froze. Sam looked over. "What is it?" Moreno pointed to a series of offshore accounts tied to the Foundation's charity funds. "These aren't just donations." She clicked on one transaction. An unexplained withdrawal of $500,000 made the same month Emily Carter disappeared. Sam's stomach dropped. "They're paying people off," he muttered. Moreno's voice was tight. "Or worse, they're funding something." Before Sam could respond, his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Carter. A distorted voice spoke. "You're getting too close." Sam's heart pounded. "Who is this?" A pause. "Then, if you want to find Emily Carter, check Archer's Hollow." Click. The call went dead. Moreno's eyes widened. "Archer's Hollow? That's the old quarry outside of town," Sam finished, already grabbing his coat. "We need to move, now. Because if the tip was right, they were about to find Emily Carter, or what was left of her." Chapter 7. The Ticking Clock. The drive to Archer's Hollow was silent. The only sound, the rhythmic hum of the engine and the faint crackle of the police radio. The abandoned quarry lay on the farthest edge of Blackwood, a forgotten place that had once been a pillar of industry before it was left to rot. Now it was nothing more than a dumping ground, an isolated patch of land where no one asked questions. Detective Sam Carter gripped the steering wheel, his pulse pounding in his ears. The anonymous call had been clear. If you want to find Emily Carter, check Archer's Hollow. Beside him, Lisa Moreno scanned the map on her phone, her jaw tight. No one's been out here in years. If they brought her here, it's because they don't expect anyone to find her. Sam didn't answer. He already knew the truth. If Emily was here, she wouldn't be for much longer. Time was running out. Into the hollow. The road narrowed as they neared the quarry, thick trees pressing in from both sides. Finally, the rusted remains of an old security gate came into view, barely hanging on its hinges. Sam killed the engine. The silence was deafening. They stepped out, weapons drawn. The quarry stretched before them, a vast crater of crumbling rock and stagnant water. Rusted machinery, long abandoned, jutted from the ground like skeletal remains. And at the far end, a tunnel entrance. Sam felt his stomach tighten. A faded danger, unstable structure sign was bolted to the rock beside the entrance. The wind howled through the gaping mouth of the tunnel, carrying the scent of damp earth and decay. "Jesus," Moreno muttered. "If she's in there." "Then we get her out," Sam said, stepping forward. They had no choice. They were out of time, the search. The tunnel was cold and claustrophobic, its damp walls slick with moisture. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating old wooden supports, collapsed passages and discarded mining equipment. Then, a sound. Faint, a whisper. Sam froze. "Did you hear that?" Moreno nodded, her grip tightening on her gun. It came from up ahead. They moved deeper into the tunnel, the sound growing clearer. Then, a shaky breath, a whimper. "Help!" Sam's heart pounded as he swung his flashlight toward the sound, and there she was. Emily Carter. Emily Carter was slumped against the wall of the tunnel, her wrists chained to a rusted iron pipe. Her skin was pale, her lips cracked, her body limp from exhaustion. She barely reacted to the light, her sunken eyes blinking slowly. Moreno dropped to her knees, pressing 2 fingers to Emily's neck. "She's alive, but she's weak." Emily flinched at the touch but didn't resist. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Please." Sam immediately worked at the chains. "We're getting you out of here." Moreno grabbed a water bottle from her belt, pressing it to Emily's lips. "Try to drink." Emily's breath hitched as the water touched her tongue, and for the first time, a flicker of life returned to her eyes. Then, footsteps, echoing from deeper inside the mine. The trap. Sam and Moreno snapped their weapons toward the sound. A figure emerged from the darkness, a tall man in a tactical jacket, his face partially hidden beneath the shadow of his cap. But his voice, unmistakable. Sergeant Kyle Brooks. Sam's grip on his gun tightened. "You son of a bitch." Brooks smirked, stepping long enough. Moreno steadied her aim. "Drop your weapon, Brooks." Brooks tilted his head. "Now why would I do that?" Sam clenched his jaw. "You're working for the Foundation." Brooks's smirk deepened. "You don't get it, do you, Carter?" He glanced at Emily. "You think you saved her? You think this ends with me?" He shook his head, almost amused. "This is bigger than me." His hand twitched toward his holster. Sam fired first. The shot hit Brooks in the shoulder, sending him staggering back against the wall. His gun clattered to the ground. Blood seeped through his jacket, but his smirk never faded. "You think this stops anything?" he rasped. "You think the Foundation just lets you walk away?" Moreno pressed a knee into his back as she yanked his arms behind him. "You're done." Brooks chuckled. "You really think that?" Then his smile vanished, and he whispered something that made Sam's blood run cold. "You should have checked the car." Sam barely had time to react before, boom! The explosion. The blast ripped through the mine entrance, shaking the tunnel. The shockwave sent Sam, Moreno, and Emily crashing to the ground as debris rained down around them. For a moment, there was nothing but dust and darkness. Then, silence. Sam coughed, his ears ringing, his vision blurred. He could barely make out Moreno's silhouette, pushing herself up from the rubble. Then, reality hit. The entrance was gone, sealed by a controlled explosion, and Brooks gone. His cuffs lay empty on the ground. No way out, Moreno swore under her breath. They set us up. Sam clenched his fists. They knew we were coming. Emily stirred weakly, her voice hoarse. They won't stop. Moreno steadied her. We won't let them. Sam exhaled sharply, staring at the sealed entrance of the mine. They had Emily. They had proof. And now they had the Foundation's full attention. This wasn't just a cover-up anymore. It was a war. Chapter 8. The Betrayal. The suffocating darkness inside the collapsed mine tunnel was absolute. Dust and debris still hung in the air, the aftermath of the explosion settling over the broken remains of the entrance. Detective Sam Carter coughed against the thick dust cloud, his ears still ringing from the blast. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, Sam? He turned toward the sound of Lisa Moreno's voice. She was groaning as she pushed herself up from the debris, her flashlight flickering weakly. Yeah, Sam rasped, checking his limbs. No broken bones, just a pounding headache. He turned to Emily Carter, who was slumped against the tunnel wall, coughing weakly. Moreno moved toward her immediately, checking her pulse. She's alive, but we needed to get her out of here. Sam swung his flashlight toward the sealed entrance. The explosion had caved in the mine's only exit, leaving nothing but a solid wall of rock and twisted steel beams. Brooks had set them up. He had planned this. No way out? Sam took a slow breath, forcing himself to think. The mine was old, and that meant tunnels, passageways, maybe even a ventilation shaft. He turned his flashlight toward the ceiling, scanning the rocky surface. The walls were uneven, lined with ancient wooden support beams that looked ready to crumble. There has to be another way out, he muttered. Moreno wiped sweat from her forehead. We don't have time to wait for a rescue team, Sam nodded. Then we find our own way. Finding the exit, he turned back to Emily, who was struggling to keep her eyes open. Emily, he said gently, do you remember anything about this place? Did they ever take you through another tunnel? She was weak, but she nodded faintly. There's a passage. Sam leaned closer. Where? Emily's fingers twitched, barely lifting as she pointed deeper into the mine. Sam and Moreno exchanged a look. They had no choice. With Emily barely able to stand, Sam lifted her onto his back, carrying her as they moved through the suffocating darkness. Through the tunnels. The deeper they went, the colder it became. The walls dripped with moisture, the air stale and thick with the scent of rot. Their flashlights flickered against old, rusted mining equipment abandoned decades ago. Then Moreno froze. Sam, she pointed ahead. The tunnel split into two paths. One was narrow and partially collapsed, the other wider but leading into complete darkness. Sam's grip tightened on Emily. Which way? Emily stirred against his back. Left. They moved quickly, navigating through jagged rocks and unstable ground. The tunnel sloped upward, a sign that they were moving toward the surface. Then Sam saw it, a shaft opening above them, covered by an old, rusted grate. Our way out, he breathed. Breaking free, Moreno climbed first, using the old support beams like a ladder. The wood groaned under her weight, but she managed to reach the grate, shoving against it with all her strength. Damn it, she gritted her teeth. It stuck. Sam carefully set Emily down, then climbed up beside Moreno. Together, they heaved against the grate. Rust flaked beneath their fingers as metal groaned in protest. Then it gave way. A gust of fresh air hit them as the grate clattered to the ground outside. They had made it. Moreno scrambled out first, pulling Emily up as Sam hoisted himself through the opening. They collapsed onto damp grass, breathing hard, the cool night air washing over them. They were out, but this wasn't over. The betrayal. Sam barely had time to register the relief before flashing blue lights appeared in the distance. A line of police vehicles roared up the dirt road toward them. But something was wrong. The officers weren't from their team. Moreno's breath hitched. What the hell? Then Sergeant Kyle Brooks stepped out of the lead vehicle, a smug grin on his face. And suddenly Sam knew. The real trap wasn't the mine. The real trap was right here, and they had walked straight into it. Chapter 9. The Final Stand. The cool night air burned in Detective Sam Carter's lungs as he stood on the damp grass, Emily Carter barely conscious beside him. His heart pounded as the police vehicles roared toward them, their blue lights flashing like sirens in the dark. Except this wasn't a rescue. Sam's gut twisted as Sergeant Kyle Brooks stepped out of the lead vehicle, his face set in a smug grin. More officers followed, their weapons drawn, but they weren't part of the Blackwood County Police Department's trusted team. These officers were handpicked, bought, controlled by the Foundation. Brooks hadn't just set the mine explosion, he had orchestrated everything, ensuring they had nowhere to run. Sam's fingers twitched toward his gun, but he knew the odds. 4 of them, at least a dozen of Brooks's men. And Emily, too weak to move. Still, if this was how it ended, he wouldn't go down easy. A corrupt showdown, Brooks took a slow step forward, his hands casually resting on his belt, as if this were nothing more than a routine arrest. "Carter," he said, shaking his head, "you just don't know when to stop." Moreno stood protectively in front of Emily, her jaw tight. "You're done, Brooks." Brooks smirked. "You really think so?" He gestured around them. "Take a look, Detective. Who's going to stop me? You?" His eyes gleamed. "You've lost." Sam clenched his fists. "You don't get to decide that." Brooks let out a low chuckle. "Oh, I think I do. See, you have something we want." He tilted his head toward Emily. "And unfortunately, we can't have her running around talking about things she doesn't understand." Emily flinched, her voice hoarse. You won't get away with this." Brooks gave her a mockingly sympathetic look. "That's where you're wrong." Then he nodded toward his men. "Cuff them." A desperate move. The moment the first officer stepped forward, Sam moved. In a fluid motion, he drew his weapon, grabbing Moreno's wrist and yanking her down just as he fired the first shot. The bullet hit one of Brooks' officers in the shoulder. Chaos erupted. Moreno dropped low, using the distraction to fire a round of her own, hitting another officer's leg. Emily, too weak to fight, crawled to cover behind a fallen tree. Brooks lunged for his own gun, but Sam was faster. He closed the distance, slamming into the corrupt officer, sending them both crashing to the ground. Brooks grunted, rolling to grab his weapon, but Sam was already on him, punching him hard across the jaw. "You think you can silence everyone?" Sam growled. "Not this time." Brooks spat blood, his lips split. "You don't get it, Carter. This is bigger than me. It doesn't end here." Sam pressed his knee against Brooks's chest, his gun aimed directly between his eyes. "You're right." Sam said coldly, "It ends with all of you." Backup arrives. Just as Brooks' remaining officers regrouped, ready to overwhelm Sam and Moreno, more sirens filled the night. Real BCPD backup. Captain Evelyn Harker's voice boomed from a megaphone. "Drop your weapons now," Sam exhaled sharply. They had called for backup before heading to the mine, just in case. And now, it had saved their lives. The fall of the Foundation with nowhere left to run, Brooks's men reluctantly surrendered, dropping their weapons as real officers flooded the scene. Moreno cuffed Brooks, yanking him to his feet. "Guess you're not as untouchable as you thought." Brooks's smirk finally faltered. Sam turned to Emily, who trembled but held her head high. She had survived. And now, the Foundation's carefully crafted lies were about to crumble. Sam took a slow breath. It was over. For now. Chapter 10. The Aftermath. The morning sun bathed Blackwood in golden light, illuminating a town that would never be the same. The storm had passed, but its wreckage remained, a shattered web of secrets, fallen men of power, and a system that had protected monsters for years finally torn apart. Detective Sam Carter stood outside the Blackwood County Police Department, watching as federal agents led Dr. James Holloway and Sergeant Kyle Brooks out in handcuffs. Holloway, once a respected professor and philanthropist, kept his head down, his carefully curated reputation reduced to nothing more than a disgrace. Brooks, the corrupt officer who had betrayed them, locked eyes with Sam, a smirk still playing on his bruised lips. But there was no confidence in it, just the remnants of a man who had lost everything. Justice had come for them, and it wasn't stopping there. The fall of the Foundation. Over the following days, the Foundation's house of lies crumbled under the weight of the truth. Sealed case files were unearthed, revealing decades of disappearances, bribes, and conspiracies buried beneath layers of power and influence. Rachel Miles' murder was officially acknowledged, forcing the town to face the brutal reality that her case had been deliberately covered up. Emily Carter's survival and testimony became the keystone that shattered the Foundation's grip on Blackwood. The media storm was unrelenting. Every major network carried the headline that shook the town to its core. The Foundation exposed, secret society linked to abductions, murder, and police corruption. The fallout was swift. Politicians, businessmen, high-ranking officials, names that once carried untouchable influence were now synonymous with scandal and crime. Some were arrested, others vanished. And those who remained, they were running out of places to hide. Wally Griggs' fate. In the midst of the chaos, one lingering question remained. What had happened to Wally Griggs? The man who had risked everything to come forward. The man who had been their first real lead. For weeks, the department had searched for him, following every possible lead. But Wally was gone, until the morning after the arrests. Sam received a call from Officer Grady at the precinct. "You're going to want to come down to Mercer Bridge," Grady had said. "We found him." When Sam arrived, he saw Wally sitting on an old wooden bench, staring at the river as if nothing had happened. His once wild beard was trimmed, his clothes cleaner than before. Sam approached cautiously. "Wally?" The old man turned his head, a knowing smile on his lips. "You took down the bastards, didn't you?" Wally rasped. Sam sat down next to him. "We got most of them," Wally chuckled, shaking his head. "Most ain't all." Sam studied him. "Where the hell have you been?" Wally shrugged. "Laying low. After I told you what I knew, I figured some real bad folks might come looking for me. So I disappeared before they could make me disappear for real." Sam exhaled, nodding. "Smart." Wally turned, his expression suddenly serious. "But I ain't stupid. You know as well as I do, this ain't over." Sam met his gaze. "No, it's not." Wally pulled a crumpled cigarette from his pocket, lighting it with hands that had seen too much. "Be careful, detective," he said, exhaling a stream of smoke. "These kind of people, they don't stay buried for long." Sam knew he was right. Emily Carter's strength at Blackwood County Hospital. Emily Carter sat near the window of her recovery room, staring at the sunlight that streamed through the blinds. She was alive, but she was different. The light in her eyes had dimmed, not gone, but changed. Sam and Lisa Moreno entered quietly, and Emily turned, offering them a small, knowing smile. "You did it," she said, her voice still raw. Moreno shook her head. "You did it, Emily." Emily exhaled, gripping the hospital blanket. I thought I'd never make it out." Sam sat beside her. "You did, and because of you, they won't hurt anyone else." Tears welled in her eyes, but she wiped them away quickly. "And Rachel?" Sam's chest tightened. "Her family finally has answers." Emily nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She was the real hero. She never gave up. Neither had Emily. The loose ends. Despite the arrests, Sam knew this wasn't truly over. Not everyone in the Foundation had been caught. Some of the most powerful members had disappeared, slipping into the shadows before the authorities could reach them. They would try to rebuild, try to hide their sins once again. And that meant Sam's fight wasn't over. One final warning. That night, Sam sat alone in his apartment, reviewing case files when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Silence. Then a distorted voice spoke. "You think you've won?" Sam's grip tightened. "Who is this?" A pause. Then, "The Foundation never dies." The line went dead. Sam exhaled slowly, his eyes darkening. They were still out there, still watching, still waiting. And that meant one thing. The fight wasn't over, not yet, not ever. As the dust settled over Blackwood, the town would never forget the horrors buried beneath its surface. But neither would those who had survived. Evil had been exposed, but in the shadows it still lurked, waiting for the right moment to return. And when it did, Detective Sam Carter would be ready. Some secrets refuse to stay buried, and some battles never truly end.
Every story has an end, but here, the mysteries never stop. Thank you for watching and being a part of this journey into the unknown. Your support keeps these stories alive, and there's plenty more waiting for you. We drop 3 new stories every week. So if you crave suspense, the unexplained, and the downright chilling, make sure you're subscribed and ready for what's next. Until then, keep your lights on, your doors locked, and remember, some stories stay with you long after they're told.